Yet doing Tai Chi in public administration is not healthy at all. In local slang, it means shirking responsibility or not giving people the help they need. In other words, maladministration. Let's say no to that. To complain against government departments and public organizations, please call the Office of the Ombudsman.
My name's Steve Maxwell,
And this is Deadly Pole to Pole.
Whoa! Go, go, go!
It's pulling him right into the coral.
It's a magnificent sight!
Yes! So close!
No, he got my pole!
Sunday, Deadly Pole to Pole at 8 on Pearl. A group of Americans fighting the deadly Ebola virus at a treatment center in Liberia.
We want to talk to some of the patients, but you have to keep your distance.
Also on the next 60 Minutes, comedian Steve Carroll taking on a deadly serious role at the height of his Hollywood success. Saturday night, 60 Minutes at 6:30 on Pearl.
Court setback for Occupy protesters. To go where no spacecraft has gone before, on a comet. And one fan steals the show at cricket match. Good evening, thanks for joining us. A high court judge today dismissed an appeal by Occupy protesters against injunction orders to clear out the Mongkok protest site. However, it's still not clear yet when authorities will move in. Evelina Lung with more.
The injunction orders that allow bailiffs to clear out the Mongkok Occupy protest site will continue to be in place. This comes after the High Court rejected protester Dominic Fox's appeal against the injunction orders and the submission for a stay of execution of the orders. Fox lawyer Gladys Lee argued that problems related to security issues should be dealt with by the Security Bureau, not by individuals. This, Lee said, is to prevent private individuals from abusing the court and seeking civil remedy when circumstances don't amount to the invasion of private rights. Also, she added that one has to suffer particular, direct, and substantial damage before presenting a case to the court against public nuisance. Lee added the application for a submission for a stay of execution of the injunction orders is to ensure protesters know the details of the orders before authorities take action. However, Judge Thomas Au ruled the appeal as unsound. He also refused to delay the injunctions. The judgment was welcomed by one of the plaintiffs' legal representatives, who said authorities will be assisting them with their clearance action.
We will envisage, on the when enforcing the order, that might be disorder, public disorder. So every time we will inform the police of our intended action. So this time is no exception.
In the afternoon, a separate court hearing was held on how the injunction orders should be carried out. Among the issues discussed, should defendants be brought to the court within 48 hours of the arrest? Which court should they be brought to? And should they be granted bail? He will give his judgment either today or tomorrow. Even after the judge gives a stamp of approval for authorities to carry out the injunction orders, the injunction's plaintiffs still have to run a statement of the orders in newspapers and make the details of the injunction orders visible to the protesters in Mongkok before any action can be taken. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
Well, 5 people were arrested over the assault on Next Media chairman Jimmy Lai yesterday. They've now been freed on bail. And as Joel Da Silva reports, police came under fire today for arresting 2 Occupy volunteers.
These 2 Occupy volunteers have been released on bail and will have to report to the police in 2 weeks' time. They are accused of taking part in a fight in a public place. The case has to do with an assault on media tycoon Jimmy Lai at the Admiralty protest site yesterday. The 2 volunteers restrained a man who along with 2 others threw rotten animal parts at Lai. The alleged attackers, detained on suspicion of common assault and fighting in a public place, have also been freed on bail. The volunteers claim they were merely assisting the police. And they say they were surprised when finding out they were under arrest after going to the police station to testify. The decision to go after those who allegedly initiated the attack and those who attempted to stop it is not going down well.
I think it's very unfair. You know, the 2 guards, you know, they're just making sure the order, you know, they're keeping orders, and they were arrested and accused.
Legislators who side with the Occupy volunteers say their arrests were politically motivated.
In fact, what they did gave us the impression that there must be some directives from the higher level of the police.
The Civil Human Rights Front led a rally to the police headquarters demanding an apology. Officers tried to stop them, saying it was an unauthorized protest. Already at their destination, demonstrators called for any charges against the volunteers to be dropped. Having managed to bring their indignation to the headquarters of the police, demonstrators not only demanded an apology for the handling of yesterday's scuffles, but they also called for the resignation of Police Chief Andy Zhang, who they say is to blame for alleged police misconduct since the beginning of the protests. João da Silva, TVB News.
Well, the Federation of Students said tonight that their Beijing trip is a go, or at least they'll try. 3 to 4 representatives will leave for the capital on Saturday. The delegation wants to meet central government officials to discuss political reform for Hong Kong.
Students, representing the future of Hong Kong, they would like to make the effort to see if the official will really focus or respond to Hong Kong people's voice, and if students they still reject their voice or use the past practice to apply to those students, then it also means and release a political message to Hong Kong people that Beijing or the central government would not respect Hong Kong people in the coming future.
3 people have been arrested after customs officers seized $34,000 worth of suspected counterfeit rice. Earlier this evening, customs officers found more than 125 kilogram bags of rice at a warehouse in Yuen Long. They also came across lots of materials used for fake packaging. 3 brothers between the ages of 24 and 30 were arrested. Authorities say they're part of a ring that sells low-quality Thai rice for almost twice its cost. World leaders from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations have gathered for a series of summits in Myanmar this week. And while little of substance is expected, the event gives a chance for some political foes to sit down for face-to-face meetings. Alan Booknia reports.
The East Asia Summit brought together the 10 ASEAN nations, along with the leaders of China, Japan, South Korea, the United States, Russia, India, Australia, and New Zealand. For U.S. President Barack Obama, it presented another opportunity to strengthen America's relationships in the region.
I intend to continue to invest in these efforts not only during our summits, but more importantly, on a day-to-day basis. During the past 6 years, we've made great strides in elevating and expanding this partnership, but I think we all agree we can still do more.
Territorial disputes of strategic importance to most countries at the summit were tops on the agenda. It was agreed that China and Southeast Asian nations would work toward an early conclusion for a code of conduct in the South China Sea. Japanese media reported that Premier Li Keqiang met on the sidelines with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe last night. It's reported they agreed to take steps to improve Sino-Japanese relations and boost strategic bilateral development. The summit is the culmination of a year in the diplomatic limelight for Myanmar and its president Thein Sein, after long being shunted to the international sidelines under its former military rulers. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
Reaction is mixed to a landmark climate change agreement between China and the U.S. Some call it a big step forward, while others insist more needs to be done.
The Secretary General commended the joint announcement by China and the United States of their post-2020 action on climate change as an important contribution to the new climate agreement to be reached next year in Paris. The Secretary General thanked President Xi Jinping and President Barack Obama for their personal commitment to work together to remove any impediments to reaching an agreement in Paris.
I was particularly distressed by the deal apparently he's reached with the Chinese on his current trip, which, as I read the agreement, requires the Chinese to do nothing at all for 16 years, while these carbon emission regulations are creating havoc in my state and other states around the country.
It's hard for these countries to stand on the sidelines now. You have the two biggest emitters moving forward, and I think that'll put a lot of pressure on other countries to come forward with their climate targets in early next year.
The UN Security Council has held another emergency meeting over the crisis in Ukraine. This happened hours after NATO's top commander said Russian military equipment was being sent to regions held by pro-Moscow rebels. It was the 26th time the Council had held an emergency session over Ukraine, and again the meeting adjourned without any action. As a permanent member of the 15-member Council, Russia has veto power. NATO says columns of Russian troops, tanks, and weaponry have been entering Ukraine over the past 48 hours.
Today, we have all the evidence to constate that Ukraine is surrounded by a huge amount of armaments and the troops. We demand from Russia, now in here, to explain.
Russia's deputy UN envoy Alexander Pankin said NATO's assessment did not reflect the situation on the ground. He says the equipment and troops are on Russian territory, not Ukrainian.
The challenge with the account of the Russians is that NATO and the OSCE both conveyed that large military convoys of Russian-supplied heavy weapons and tanks have moved to the front lines of the conflict in recent days. That's a clear violation of the Minsk protocols.
As the death toll in the conflict grows, so too do fears that a ceasefire between Ukraine and pro-Russian rebels is disintegrating, reigniting fears of full-scale fighting or sporadic battles that could drag on for months.
While either scenario would be a catastrophe for Ukraine, a third concerning prospect is that of a frozen or protracted conflict that would entrench the current status quo in southeastern Ukraine for years or several decades to come.
So the question is not what Russia will try to do in eastern Ukraine. The question is what we, the international community, will seek to do to prevent yet another frozen conflict in Europe manufactured by Russia.
European Union foreign ministers meet in Brussels on Monday, but they are not expected to step up current sanctions against Russia. In the meantime, Kiev is redeploying troops in the east in preparation for a possible new offensive by pro-Russian separatists. To the U.S. now, and a terrifying ordeal for two men washing windows at the World Trade Center in New York. Take a look at this. One of the cables holding them up suddenly gave way and flipped the scaffold. The workers were left dangling from the nation's tallest skyscraper, 68 stories above the street. Spectators below watched in horror as the men had to hold on for 2 agonizing hours. Firefighters used diamond cutters to saw a hole through a double-layered window to pull them to safety. A remarkable achievement by the European Space Agency. It now has bragging rights for being the first to land a space probe on a comet. Sonia Artero has more.
Success from Mission Control in Germany. Landing a space probe on a comet, much like landing a spacecraft on the moon, started as a dream. But Europe's Rosetta mission turned space fantasy into bold reality. It did so by chasing Comet 67P for an entire decade, clocking over 6 billion kilometers in space. Originally launched in 2004, Rosetta had to slingshot 3 times around the Earth and once around Mars before it could work up enough speed to land on the comet. It was like